think the profile of the symposium has increased over the years. I feel like the stature of it and the types of people who will come and give keynote speeches or people who will come and welcome in the morning has increased. And you feel this throughout the entire watershed movement throughout the county.
20 years of the symposium, there's been increased awareness, I would say, of the environment, of the impacts of the environment when we do things in creeks and watersheds, a desire and interest in a desire to mitigate those impacts, and then also to repair and or restore damage done either historically or more recently.
Through time, what I have seen is that the groups have become also a little bit more sophisticated because of the technology that we have, but at the same time, like, the changing demographics have also kind of brought new challenges to the groups. And so I think that, like, what I have seen is more of this effort of, like, bringing new people, like bringing the new generations, like bringing, like, the neighbors, so these advantaged communities, and kind of reaching out to those that are not already kind of like into the fold.
As we have all worked together, we've started to do bigger things. And we've started to copy each other so that, I mean, not in a bad way, but in a good way, so that the same kind of project will appear in several places around the same time. And if somebody has a good new idea, then we have a way to spread it and make more use of it.
The word is getting out to more and more people in the community that things are happening in watersheds. This is a good place to come and learn more. I've seen a lot more networking happening over the years. There is also advanced in technology of websites and apps that are collecting information, that especially with watershed health.
I think there was much less awareness than there is now. So I think the level of awareness generally, at least within the environmental community, has definitely gone up. It doesn't change the fact there's still plenty of people who don't know the name of their local creek and don't think at all about the fact that what runs off their property is going to end up in that creek. But I think that people who are in the environmental community are much more aware of that.
The other thing that I have seen more is more planning. More talking about long-term planning at meetings, so it's more about kind of city planning or regional planning or like big picture type of discussions that that didn't used to be the case. Like before, we talked about kind of like my little garden project and my little like creek restoration project, and now we talk a lot about bigger projects that are like multi-year that have taken a lot of like different partners to accomplish.
It's really inspiring to me, just when I think that I know everybody who's involved in watersheds in Contra Costa County. Here comes another symposium and I meet another dozen or so people that aren't in my Rolodex. So that to me is one of the cool things about the symposium, is that it hasn't reached critical mass. Instead, it just keeps growing and we see a lot of new faces.
Hi everyone, welcome back. All right, we're going into the intense part of our program where we get to have 4 speakers, 2 awards, and a couple of videos back to back. There's a couple things that I do want to mention though. This wonderful video that we've been seeing with interviews from people that have been involved in the symposium for the last 20 years, again, was sponsored by the RCD, but it was filmed by the Martinez Oral History, I already forgot it, Project. I think it's Project. So they had a couple days where they interviewed people that have been a part of this symposium and the Watershed Forum over the last 20 years, and this is the end result. So with some hard work from Lisa Damerel with the RCD and Chris Lim with the RCD, as well as the Historical or Oral History Society, we have this wonderful project, which, as you can tell, I'm streaming on YouTube. So eventually you all will get to have the link in case you missed anything and you want to see a specific interview or the answer to a specific question, that will be available to you. Now we're going to go into our next presentation, and our presenter is Evan Schwartz. He's with the California Coastal Commission, and I had the opportunity to hear him speak at the Coastal Cleanup Day Site Captains Training in August, I think it is, or early September. And he spoke about the legacy of Coastal Cleanup Day, and it was its 35th anniversary. And there's so many things that this project has brought to what we do as watershed stewards. So I He was lucky enough to be sitting next to me, so I like gave him the elbow. I'm like, I need you to come and talk to the symposium. Like, please fit me in, put me on your calendar now. You have 3 months to make it work. And he did. So it is my absolute pleasure to bring up Evan Schwartz so he can share with you the legacy, again, we're going back to our themes, of the Coastal Cleanup Day.
Thank you. I was just telling someone this podium's built for tall people. Thank you very much for having me here, and thank you all for doing what you do. It's so inspirational to be in a room full of mission-driven people. Not all of the rooms are like that. So I'm really glad to be here, and thanks for having me. I was asked to tell you the story of California Coastal Cleanup Day, so I'm going to perform a little magic trick here, and I'm going to condense 35 years into 15 minutes, I hope, and I'm going to try to limit myself as best I can. I tend to go on a little bit, but I do want to give you a brief history of the cleanup, but really more broadly tell you about the impact that this incredible event has had on the entire marine debris community and on California itself. So let's get started. Coastal Cleanup Day actually started back in 1985. The Coastal Commission ran the first cleanup along with a whole lot of different partners, now 35 years ago, and we were inspired by volunteers in Oregon who had undertaken a similar cleanup just the year before. And in that first year, back in 1985, we had 2,500 volunteers spread out across all 15 coastal counties. So a pretty good turnout for our first event, and the best part about it was that it was incredibly inspirational. I mean, we turned those 2,500 volunteers into lifetime coastal stewards through this one event. And there was so much enthusiasm for it that we decided to not only continue the annual cleanup, but also to expand it into a year-round beach cleanup program that we call Adopt a Beach. In 1986, the Ocean Conservancy, which was then known as the Center for Marine Conservation, ran their first beach cleanup in Texas. And they found similar enthusiasm, so soon after that they started reaching out to various partners around the nation, including the Coastal Commission, to create a national cleanup, which later became an international cleanup and now has become known as the International Coastal Cleanup. It's an event that takes place on the same day all around the world in over 100 countries. It's now the world's largest volunteer event dedicated to the marine environment. And I am very proud to say that California always leads the nation and oftentimes leads the entire world in volunteer participation. The thing that Ocean Conservancy brought to the cleanup that was so crucial was data collection. Now every volunteer for the cleanup not only picks up trash, but they also record every single piece of trash that they pick up for inclusion in the Ocean Conservancy's database, which is now the world's largest trash database in history. We learned an enormous amount from collecting all of this data, and what we primarily discovered was that everything we had thought about marine debris up to that point was completely wrong. We used to believe that most of the trash on our beaches started at sea and washed up from an ocean-going source. But the data showed us that most of the debris on California's beaches originates on land. There is some that comes from beachgoers, but most of it actually comes from inland areas, from urban areas, from urban and inland creeks, and it washes down through creeks and rivers and stormwater systems to eventually be deposited on beaches. And we now know that up to 80% of the trash on California's beaches originates on land. So when we looked at this information, the Coastal Commission made a decision to start to target the areas where trash was coming from rather than only hitting the areas where it was ending up. We wanted to stop trash where it starts. So we started to turn our sights east, and we started to clean up in inland communities. And we wanted to both capture trash before it has a chance to enter the ocean, but we also wanted to make a better connection between inland communities and the health of our coast. And the effort to expand has been quite successful. We now have cleanups taking place in 55 of California's 58 counties. We have more than 1,000 individual cleanups across the state. The cleanup encompasses every major waterway in the state, along with hundreds of smaller rivers and creeks, not to mention just about every mile of publicly accessible coastline. And that geographic growth was accompanied by an increase in participation as well. In 2019, we had 74,000 volunteers picking up 900,000 pounds of trash in only 3 hours. And since we started, more than 1.6 million volunteers have participated in the cleanup, and they've cleaned up over 25 million pounds of trash. And Coastal Cleanup Day is now the state's largest annual volunteer event. So the cleanup really has inspired generations of participants, not just in California, but around the world, who have grown tired and frustrated with plastic pollution. The cleanup really has helped to nurture a constituency that supports efforts to try to stem the tide of trash in our environment. And this concern was only amplified by the discovery in the early 2000s of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch by Charles Moore and the Algalita Marine Research Foundation. So when we looked at the combination of the volume of trash that our volunteers were cleaning up on shorelines every single year, combined with the staggering amounts of trash that we were finding floating in these areas of the ocean, it really galvanized a whole new movement in the marine debris field. And in our field, that movement always starts with new research. So you can see here the number of papers that have been published in scientific journals related to marine debris has just exploded over the last 10 to 15 years. And what we've been discovering and learning through all this new research has really helped us truly identify the impacts of plastic debris and the sources of all this trash as well. And what we've learned, sorry, I'm supposed to skip that, is what we've learned is that the plastic pollution crisis is much worse than we thought and continues to worsen. We now know that 8 million tons of plastic, that's more than 18 billion pounds of plastic, or the equivalent of a garbage truck full of plastic dumping itself into the ocean every single minute of the year, enters the world's oceans every single year. And only 3% of that can be found on the surface of the ocean's gyres. So the fate of the remaining 97% is really largely unknown, although we do know that the world's coastlines are one accumulating point for much of the debris. But plastic debris can also be found on the ocean floor, in the ocean sediments, throughout the water column. It can even be found in ice cores taken from both the North and South Pole. And sadly, significant amounts of plastic end up in species at all levels of the ocean food chain. According to the Secretariat on the Convention on Biological Diversity, over 800 species have been impacted by marine debris. And those impacts can range from physical to chemical. We've now seen that the toxic chemicals that are used in the production of certain forms of plastics can migrate into the tissues of animals that ingest them. And that can cause toxicological impacts at various levels, from macromolecular to the organism itself to even entire populations of species. And if plastics are entering the ocean food chain, it means they're also entering the human food chain. Recent studies in both California and Indonesia have found that over 25% of all fish and over 50% of all species in these markets had plastic in them, which means that humans are inadvertently eating plastic when we ingest seafood. So what do we do about all that? Because it's pretty bad. Well, California, thankfully, has been taking a lot of action. Building off 30 years of data collected from our cleanups, California has been taking a number of different actions over the last decade to try to address the items that are most commonly found to be polluting our waters. Since 2009, cities across California have been banning single-use plastic grocery bags, which is an item that typically had been found among the top 5 items we clean up every year during Coastal Cleanup Day. A statewide ban was finally passed and ratified in 2016, and as you can see, These bans have had a dramatic impact on what we find during our cleanup events, to the point where plastic grocery bags have dropped out of our top 10 items entirely, which is a really, really dramatic drop. Thank you. I know, I didn't do it, but still, it's worth applause. A drop like that is really significant because our data set is incredibly stable. The top 10 items that we picked up in 1988 were exactly the same top 10 items we picked up in 2017, almost in exactly the same order, except for plastic grocery bags. So it shows us that not only are the bans working, but it also lets us know that Coastal Cleanup Day data can be a really effective tool for measuring the impacts of different policies that we put in place around the state. There are similar efforts now in the state around foam food packaging, and there's a new piece of legislation that's aimed to reduce the number of plastic straws that are used in eat-in restaurants across the state, and we'll be seeing results of those show up in our data in the coming years. But really the biggest game changer that has happened recently are the new trash amendments that were added to municipal stormwater permits passed and ratified by the State Water Board back in 2017. These trash amendments require cities across California to reach zero trash entering receiving water bodies within the next 10 to 14 years, which is kind of a crazy goal. It's a huge goal, and it's going to bring a whole variety of new efforts across California to reduce the amount of trash, first that's created, and then to prevent that trash from reaching streams and rivers and ultimately the ocean. And again, all of these efforts were inspired and supported by knowledge that we gained from data that our volunteers have collected over the years. So we are seeing some progress, but there's still a lot to do. And so in 2017, the California Ocean Protection Council updated its ocean litter strategy. It's a new strategy that was just published last year, and it's a dramatic update of their previous version of this. And it really recognizes the central role that producers play in the creation and distribution of items that are likely to become ocean polluting items. So the emphasis of the strategy is on source reduction rather than on cleanup after the fact. And it calls for a whole host of new actions aimed at redesigning and reducing materials that create the largest problem for our oceans. And the targets of this new strategy were based on data collected during Coastal Cleanup Day, and the cleanup's data will be used to measure the impacts of actions taken moving into the future. And I bring this up because I would invite you all to take a look at this strategy. It's on the Ocean Protection Council's website, and there are a host of different stakeholder actions that many of which are underway already, but could all use more partners, and many of them probably align with work that you or your organizations are already doing. So we need everybody to join us in this, and so I would just invite you to take a look at that and join in the ocean litter strategy. But let me get back to Coastal Cleanup Day because it can kind of go without saying that discussing the challenge of plastic pollution can be a little depressing. It's a huge problem, and it's a growing problem. But California has a 35-year history of combating this challenge. 2 generations of volunteers working to protect our coast and ocean. Coastal Cleanup Day continues to be the state's most popular annual volunteer event, which is a testament to our growing awareness about this issue, but also a sign of our collective love of our coast and all the natural areas throughout the state. The cleanup really has helped inspire and create a constituency that wants change. And thanks to that, change is coming to California, and it's change that is going to provide long-term benefits not only to our coast, but to all the people who cherish it. And as we've often seen, as California leads, the rest of the nation will inevitably follow. And so I'd like to invite all of you to join in this effort. I'm sure all of you already have. But just as a reminder, Coastal Cleanup Day is always the 3rd Saturday of September. And as you saw from our map, there is definitely a cleanup site near you, no matter where you might live. And I would just invite you to visit our website because all of this information, all of these, in fact, a presentation very similar to this, along with a whole host of other free resources, both for formal and informal educators, are all available for free on our site. And in the meantime, I do just want to take the opportunity to thank all of you. I know everybody in this room has taken part in one of our cleanups at some point, either as a volunteer or a site captain, or even as our regional coordinator for Contra Costa County. So I do want to take this moment to just say thank you for helping lead all of California towards greater environmental stewardship. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eben. I'm going to take this off. There's one question, and there's time to get another one in, if anyone like. You had mentioned that plastic bags had dropped out of the top 10. Could you name all 10 in the top right now? Because that's the question. It's what are the top 10 sources of trash? I know that's a tall order, but can you give us, like, what is anything moved into number one spot or anything like that? Just kind of walk us through that.
Sure. So the top item is always cigarette butts, where it's about 40% of what we pick up every single year. It's pretty remarkable. And also, cigarette butts are way undercounted by our volunteers. They just get sick of cleaning them up. They get sick of counting them. So they end up writing, bajillions on the data card, which turns out isn't statistically valid. That's probably 10% of what we actually pick up each year. But there are lots of other single-use plastic items. Basically, if you took a convenience store and held it up and shook it, that's what we're finding on our beaches. It's plastic bottles, it's beverage cans, it's caps and lids, it's cutlery, plastic cutlery. It is, I'm not at 10. Anyway, the key takeaway is that 8 out of the top 10 items historically are all single-use disposable plastics. And the largest category, if you lump them into categories, the largest category would be food packaging. So wrappers, bags, bottles, cans, all of that stuff, the food packaging is the single largest component of our waste stream, and therefore the single largest component of what we're finding on our beaches.
I got another good question for you. Is any of the data from Coastal Cleanup Day available to the public?
Yes, it's all available to the public. We have spreadsheets on our website of all of the compiled data from over the years, and then the Ocean Conservancy's database is also available to the public, and you can find that at coastalcleanupdata.org. You don't need to sign in. You can explore the map, and you can drill down to find reports for your local area. And if there isn't the data you're looking for, then, and there's a cleanup going on, then encourage that site captain to encourage data collection at their site, because we don't have 100% data collection across the state, and we could really, really use it because it helps us measure impacts in so many different ways, and it helps us change laws.
Eben, thank you very much. Now Elisa is going to present the award for the Watershed Educational Program.
A big part of what we do is educating the next generation on why our watershed health is important. There are a couple programs that received nominations that actually I'm going to bring all of them up on stage if they're here. I know we have a big crew from one, and then we have a couple of representatives from the Watershed Project for the other. And then we also had the mobile fish exhibit received a nomination as well, and an award, but I didn't get any of them here this time. So I'm going to get that to them later on, get them their award. So can I bring up Urban Tilth and their Basins of Relations interns, and then also the Watershed Project. And so I think that some of you are familiar with Basins of Relations. They do wonderful work and training the next round of conservationists on what we actually do. So Nathan Bickert is one of the people who put in an award nomination for this group. There were actually two. Now we have Anne Bremer, who actually put in one for the Watershed Project in their elementary and high school education programs, specifically Rains to Roots and Wild Oysters, both of which get students outdoors and help them get their hands dirty exploring environmental science and how our environment works. Thank you. Congratulations to both of you. And let's see. I think that's it. Unless anybody wants to say anything, you don't have to. It's not required. Thank you, guys. All right, now I'm going to bring Brendan back up, and he's going to get us through the rest of our program. Thank you, guys.
Okay, this next one's gonna be a good one. It's Anna Kaufman from the Surfrider Foundation, and when Anna presented her proposal to the committee, everyone had the same question, because it was about shotgun wad watching. So everybody said, what's a shotgun wad? And I'm gonna let Anna tell you what that is herself. But Anna works tirelessly to stop the spread of plastic litter on our beaches and waterways. And after picking up over 3,000 plastic shotgun wads over the past few years, she's spearheading a global initiative to track wads in the wild. Please welcome Anna Kaufman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I know I'm from San Francisco, so not officially a Contra Costa person, but we appreciate you listening to what we have to say about these shotgun wads. Let me go to the next slide. These are wads, and I have a couple here in my hand, and I have some over in the back, so during the break we can talk wads if you want. Wads are, they come from the inside of the shotgun cartridges, and they hold the steel or lead shot inside of them, and then when a hunter or a skeet shooter or somebody shoots, they're projected out into the waterways, and they're deemed irretrievable because they're floating in the ocean or in the bay, or they're caught in a marsh, and so the hunter can't go get them, and the dog certainly doesn't want them. I don't know, does everybody know what Surfrider Foundation is? We're a nonprofit, and we are, oh, did I go past? Here we are. We have a number of programs. Our mission is to keep our oceans, waves, and beaches clean for all to enjoy, and to find creative ways to prevent plastic pollution from entering the beach and the oceans. So we have a number of programs in San Francisco, and number one, of course, is our beach cleanups, and we participate in the September Coastal Cleanup Day, always. And coastal preservation, we have a program called Hold On to Your Butts, and you can see we have bajillions of butts in San Francisco on the beaches and on our streets. This bottom photo here on the left is from North Beach, which is my neighborhood, and I noticed a huge problem in San Francisco in my neighborhood with cigarette butts. So every time I walked to the post office or to the cafe or whatever, I would use the Literati app, and I would photograph every single butt that I picked up, and had the data then to go to my local neighborhood groups to install the cigarette butt ash cans that Surfrider sponsors and puts in the neighborhood. So here I am holding a bazillion butts from North Beach, and we have now 30 cans in our neighborhood, and we ship them off to be recycled through the TerraCycle programs. And then, of course, our volunteers. We also have a Rise Above Plastics program. Basically, we're trying to get people to ditch disposables, and through that, that's including plastic straws, which I don't think was mentioned in the top 10, but that's definitely one of them, and the numbers are going down, but we still find a tremendous amount of straws. And then ocean-friendly restaurants, and then one of the newer programs, initiatives that we are working on is the plastic shotgun wad watcher, because I too didn't know what they were until I started picking up hundreds and hundreds of them in the winter and spring months after the hunting season goes past. So here we are in San Francisco Bay, and that includes you guys because we come all the way up, and what happens here affects us on the beach. This photo was taken in April of 2017 at Aquatic Park, and it's a lovely location, and there's lots of colorful wads coming in, and the swimmers are finding them too, and Shark Stewards does a twice monthly cleanup, and it's on their top 10 list of things that they're picking up at Aquatic Park. Let's see, where am I going? So most people don't know what these wads are because they are projected and hidden inside of the shotgun cartridge. So here's a little bit of the anatomy. Before we switched from lead to steel shot, we had felt or cardboard wadding inside. But now that we have steel shot, it's denser metal and it scratches the inside of the barrels, and it also has a tendency to rust. So they switched to plastic wads. So we traded one bad thing for another. And now we have these plastic wads that are coming out. And if you see the shooter here, the wad will go away from the gun. The cartridge drops by the shooter. So typically the shooter will pick up the cartridge. Those are the colorful things with the brass ends on them. They'll pick up the cartridge. The wads will drop about 20, 30, 40 yards from the shooter. It drops into the marsh, into the water, into the environment, where it will either stay put, or if it's raining or if it's if the tide's going out, it will start to get carried away. We had a lot of dry years, so basically the wads stayed put for a long time. And then when we started to get to the heavy rains, 2016, 17, 18, they started to basically just flush out into the bay and onto San Francisco beaches. And this is an old thing that I'm not here to talk about lead shot. That's a whole nother conversation for somebody else. But this is how they travel, and we are looking at wind, currents, a lot of rain, high tides. It definitely lifts them up. Plastic floats, as you know. This is a wad that I found on Baker Beach. So you just see a little tip of it. They're hiding in the reeds. If I see reeds, I know I'm going to find wads. So you pull the reeds away, and then you find this little star-shaped wad that has come from hunting. So tides, currents, rain, again, 2017. If I switched. This is my personal collection map. I didn't start to track them, although after I've picked up 3,000, I didn't know what I could do other than to track them, because for some reason, the ammunitions manufacturers don't pick up my call. They don't really want to talk to me. So I've picked up, this is Hawaii, my friends at Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii and 808 Cleanups and Surfrider in Hawaii didn't know what wads are. They guaranteed me I would never find a wad in Hawaii, and sure as shit, there they are on Kailua Beach. And then San Francisco, of course, I have a following on Instagram, and I find that the non-colorful wads don't really get as many likes as the colorful wads. So I want to keep your attention, and I'm showing you pretty wads. The red one was found in Santa Monica, so they're in down south too, but we don't find as many down there because they don't have the bay region flushing out from the duck hunting areas and the skeet shooting areas. The one over in the far right corner was in Wales. I had to go to Wales last October, and of course I was really anxious to get to the beaches because I knew the UK has a huge problem as well. I follow a lot of beach cleaners on social media, including the Marine Conservation Society there, and of course shotgun wads are a big deal. And then this, of course, is San Rafael. It's over by McNear's, and there's some target ranges in the North Bay there, and during the certain tides and certain winds, it's guaranteed that they'll be picked up. And I went there just the other day because it was raining, and I was really anxious to see the beach, and of course I was there for 3 minutes, and I picked up 8 wads. Over the holidays, I have family in Discovery Bay in Oakley, and I had never been into the Delta to try to figure out where the wads are accumulating, because they're going out with the tide and flushing, and when the snow melts, they're heading towards San Francisco. So I stopped at Martinez Harbor, and I think I picked up 25 that day. And over the holidays, last year in 2018, I met a gentleman who started this mapping program. It's an app, and it's more interactive, and he was telling me about how they could map certain things, and they use them for rock shows, like Kiss has a following and Metallica has a following, and they post all over the world of their fan base. So he started to tell me about it, and I was like, immediately thought of shotgun wads. So I don't know why. So basically what Surfrider's done is we've parked this initiative on the San Francisco Surfrider webpage just to collect data to prove a point that these wads are a problem, and they're basically coming on every beach. This is up at Point Reyes. The Russian River flushes out. A lot of hunting goes on or shooting along the river, so it comes onto their local beaches and up and down. Well, you can look at the map. It's on the San Francisco Surfrider webpage, and you can see for yourself on that one. And as far as wads go, there's various types of wads. These I picked up on Angel Island in August, I guess. I was there for a project. And the ones with the little shock absorbers, like this one here on the far left, those are typically skeet shooting or target. There's the shock absorbers because people are shooting a lot of them, so it gives relief to the shooter. And then the one without in the middle and the right is used for hunting, because hunters are limited to the number of wads that they can take out with them. This is another shot of the Bay Area, and it just gives you an idea of all the fingers that are feeding the San Francisco beaches. It goes further up in the Delta. You guys know better than I do where the hunting areas are. There's a number of gun ranges. I think there's one in Martinez as well, which is why I found so many there. The Don Edwards Hunting Reserve at the base of the bay, they partnered with Literati, and they did a cleanup over there, and they picked up 20,000 shotgun wads that had been just left behind. And of course I don't have a photo, and they haven't posted yet, so that number isn't represented on this map, but it will be because I keep hunting them. So to date, we've picked up and collected 40,000 wads. We went live with the map in January of 2019. And through volunteer efforts and people that I've known through social media, I've basically private messaged them or let them know when I see them post a shotgun wad, I'll ask them to post to the initiative. And obviously we have a problem in the Northern Hemisphere, but also in Tasmania, Australia, and New Zealand, they're finding wads. And I think that they're pretty much everywhere. I just don't really know that many people in the Southern Hemisphere to target and hit them up to post their wads. So I'm not the only one tracking wads. Kate from the Greater Farallones Association, she has a marine debris grant right now. She's working on it. She's working with the Don Edwards Reserve, which I mentioned earlier. They're aware of it through that Literati initiative. And Eden Landing Hunting Reserves, they're collecting surveys. They're talking to hunters. They're trying to raise awareness. Like I said, most people, even shooters, don't always know that they're projecting these wads into the waterways. And so they're going to be collecting data. If anybody's interested in being part of her survey, I have her information up here for you. And after they have all the data collected, they're going to be working with the reserves to implement best practices, which of course, containment is not necessarily one of those best practices. A lot of people have said, oh, let's put nets out there, and I can't think of a worse idea for wildlife. But it's been brought up. So we're trying to be smart about what we're raising awareness of. And basically what we want is a more sustainable, environmentally friendly WAD material. And it exists, but the manufacturers are slow to accept change, especially when it's driven from a conservationist. They want to have their ideas themselves. So, let's see, we're back to Baker Beach. This is what we see in January, February of every year. This is from earlier this year. These are my cleanups again. Again, blue skies get more attention than gray, dreary January days. So these are nice days that happen to exist in those months. And again, thousands and thousands of wads are just washing around in our waterways. And when they land on our beaches, we're keeping track, and they're now, we're keeping data from our beach cleanups. So I think my last slide here we go. So here's my contact information. My email is easy to remember. It's just wads@sfsurfrider.org. And yeah, there's been a lot of media attention just this year because no one was talking about it at any level. Prior to this year, there's people in Humboldt that have also picked up 3,000 wads at a lake, and they're concerned about the hunting community there. In New York, there's been another gentleman that's picked up 3,000 wads in the Seacliff Harbor, which is a skeet range. And so we're trying to raise awareness. People want to do the right thing, but there's the trouble of the manufacturers just aren't making them right now, with the exception of one, which is called Green Ops Ammo, and they can't get to scale without the assistance of the larger manufacturers. And since California voted in the legislation that keeps gun owners from ordering ammunition and being shipped to their house, they can't even access it. So California Waterfowl Association has shared with me that they have the demand from their hunters. They would like to have this, but they can't order it themselves, so we can't get it into California. So basically we're looking at policy changes to create incentives for the manufacturers to create environmentally friendly wads. So that's where we are. Data. Thanks.
Got time for a question or two?
Sure.
Thank you very much for your work. I like how everything is very Instagram friendly with the wads. Good work. Yeah. I think you just answered this question, but are there any manufacturers making steel pellet cartridges without plastic wads?
There are 3 that I'm aware of in the United that are available in the United States. Basically, in the UK, it's common practice. So there's more felt wads, and hunters in the UK couldn't even imagine having the plastic wads when they go out to hunt. But Kent Cartridge, they've partnered with a UK-based manufacturer called Gamebore. So I think it's called Kent Gamebore. It could be Kent Gamebore, but I don't know. There's an E. And they have a paper cup wad. And when I spoke with them about this a couple of years ago in 2017, they didn't think the demand existed. So there's no incentive for them to up their manufacturing on it. So basically it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg. They don't feel like they have the demand, so they're not making them. And the demand, it doesn't really exist because the awareness doesn't exist, but also because the ammunition doesn't exist. So they can't get it, especially in California. We can't order it to our homes, and they're not stocked readily at Dick's or any of the sporting goods stores. So it's really been hard to get into California. And Rio, there's another manufacturer called Rio, and they introduce a water-soluble wad, which we think is starch-based. They introduced it at the SHOT Show in February this year, but they don't make it. It was just a concept. It's just an idea, and it's just a little bit more greenwashing until, you know, the manufacturers are ready to switch entirely.
How do you get rid of them? How do you properly dispose of wads? You got 3,000 just piling up in your garage?
I do. I'm one of those people that can't let go of her wads. And I'm not alone, but basically what I've done is I try to raise awareness with them. I'm active with the Surfrider community. I've built a plastic shotgun wad chandelier that I've taken, again, like things that don't have color don't get people's attention, so I added Christmas lights to them. I took them to a friend's wood shop. I drilled holes. I put the lights through the wads, and so now I'm the proud owner of a chandelier that goes to events. And I have some lights in the back too in one of my glass containers. If you want to talk to me in the break, I'll hang out and talk wads if you want. So yeah, no, I have over 3,000 wads in my garage.
Put them to good use. Good for you. One last question for you. Is Surfrider or any other similar organizations reaching out to the hunting community, you know, sports shooting associations about changing the manufacturing?
Yes, and what we're trying to stay in our lane. Surfrider is all about protecting the ocean and the coast and access to the beach, and so keep it enjoyable and clean for all of us. So we're not really in the business of bullets and ammunition. So I had a hard time initially getting Surfrider to agree to get involved with this because everyone wanted us to stay in our lane and stay in San Francisco, and that's pretty tough because we don't sell ammunition in San Francisco, nor do we have duck hunting or a skeet club. But what happens in other areas affects us on the beach, and so since I'm the proud owner of 3,000 wads, I figure I have the right to reach out, and we're trying to raise awareness. Green Ops Ammo has a marine degradable wad that we'd like to get into other people's hands, and since the manufacturers don't really want to speak to Surfrider Foundation, we're trying to raise awareness and collect the data. So I would like to invite all of you, if you find wads, to post them on our map. It's a live thing. It's growing every day, and so once we have more and more data, in 1 year's time we have 40,000 just from beach cleaners posting wads. So if we have more, and in the hunting community, California Waterfowl Association, they're aware of our initiative, and they are a little bit frustrated because they can't get biodegradable wads yet, and so there's no real change. So we're trying to create incentives for the manufacturers to create biodegradable technology that lowers the price for everybody, because we can't have the costs go up because then the hunters won't adopt the technology. So,
two quick questions. I'm in the back. I think you had your hand up first.
Hi. So, brilliant job identifying this problem and gathering all this data. It seems to me that 40,000 wads is enough evidence that we need to take action. And so I would encourage, if you haven't already considered a Change.org petition or something like that, specifically targeted at these sporting goods shops that are not stocking this. Because, I mean, you're the expert, but from my point of view, if we could go to Dick's or we could go to Walmart and say, you know, this is a huge problem, and could you please stock these biodegradable items? I understand things can be shipped to people's homes, but from what I hear you saying, they could be shipped to stores. So would that be a leverage point? And then what can we do to encourage our state representatives to do some kind of carve out for importing the biodegradable stuff?
So great question, and we've gone over that question time and time again with supply and demand. So the only real sustainable marine and biodegradable wadding that exists in the United States right now is made by Green Ops Ammo, and they don't have the funding to go to scale. They are, meaning supply the nation, right? So they are speaking with one of the top manufacturers, and I don't know which one, they won't tell me, but it's either got to be Remington, Winchester, Kent, or there's one other, Federal. So it's one of the top 4, but they say top 3, and I don't know which are the top 3. About adopting their technology. The problem is it's a little bit more expensive, and without tax incentives for ammunitions manufacturers to create and adopt this new technology, or it's a better plastic. It's a PHA plastic as opposed to a PLA plastic, which is those plastic straws that are labeled as compostable. They're not really compostable. They're just a terrible plastic that when it enters the marine environment, it never breaks down. So we want to make sure that it's truly a sustainable marine degradable wad that exists, and Green Ops Ammo is the only one making it. So without tax incentives, I don't think that it will get to scale without a lot of pressure. And I agree, 40,000 wads is a lot, and the numbers aren't even accurate because it doesn't include the 20,000 wads that the Don Edwards picked up, or the 10,000 wads that were picked up recently in Ojai at a skeet club. So we want a lot of information, and I'm here too to ask your support and all the organizations here. With the exception of the 25 wads I picked up in Martinez, there's no wads in the Delta on our map, and it's because we don't come out here to pick them up. And so this is our attempt to raise awareness, and then, like, Dick's too, I've tried to reach out to them, and they can't get enough to stock because there aren't enough wads being made yet. So.
Oh, time for one more question, then we're going to move on. Yes, ma'am.
Are they recyclable in any other way than making chandeliers out of them?
I don't think so. I think it's garbage. Sadly, it's just trash. And I don't like throwing anything away. So the idea of having these just go into the garbage can, I figure they're more powerful in my garage so that I can use them to raise awareness.
Anna Kaufman, everybody. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Paul Dachins. And at the last symposium, for those of you who were here, he gave an enthralling speech about the historical ecology of Lower Walnut Creek and the habitat there and what makes it a special place. And you're in for a treat because he's got an update for you. Paul is the senior civil engineer with the Contra Costa County Flood Control District, and for the past 15 years, he's helped to steer the district away from its love affair with efficient concrete line channels and towards environmental sustainability. Please welcome Paul Dachins.
Thanks so much. I'll tell you right off that I do not have a shotgun wad chandelier in my garage. So despite the great lead up there, we'll see what we can do. So a quick show of hands. How many people have heard of my favorite project, Lower Walnut Creek? Wow. Okay, so that's 14 people that haven't. So for those 14, let me give you a kind of a brief update and a little background as to what Lower Walnut Creek is. So there's hundreds of miles of creeks in Contra Costa County, and about 80 miles of those our flood control district is directly responsible for. Either we steward them, we own them, we maintain them, however you want to say it. Most of these are in the Walnut Creek watershed, so the main stem of Walnut Creek plus a lot of those tributaries. And when we talk about Lower Walnut Creek, we're actually talking about not the bottom of the map and not by Nordstrom's in the city of Walnut Creek, sorry, Bob, but we're talking the lowest in elevation, so the mouth of the creek right where it goes into Sassoon Bay. So we're a very creative bunch of engineers. So when you look at this close-up view, we've decided we would name these various parts of it. We have the North Reach, which is in the north part. We have the South Reach, and we creatively came up with the Middle Reach, which fits in the middle. And a little outside of our comfort zone, we have the Pacheco Reach, which is on the west side here. And so our project moving forward now is the blue and the orange, the North and the South Reach. And as funding allows, hopefully some of the purple reach as well. And the orange or the green reach, the middle reach, is teed up for a future project. So this is a highlight of what the restoration plan looks like. Really what we're doing is about 300 acres of enhanced and new habitat. About 200 of that is different forms of wetlands, either pickleweed or brackish tidal wetlands, and it's basically the green area that's shown on the map. We also have some open waters. We have about 40 acres of transitional habitats, which is very important for refugia when we have sea level rise. It allows habitat to migrate upslope. Those are the kind of the yellow areas. And some of those orangish areas are more upland areas. And then we have about 10 acres that are reserved for trails and public access and maintenance access as well. So why are we doing this? Really, our project goal is to restore and enhance habitat in Lower Walnut Creek, provide sustainable flood protection, and allowing opportunities for public access and recreation. I don't work for the Contra Costa County Flood Control, Water Conservation, and Public Access District, so since it's really not part of our mission, we partner with other agencies like East Bay Regional Park District, various cities, and groups like the John Muir Land Trust. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we do it for landscapes like this, but we also do it for critters like this. This, as you know, is a salt marsh harvest mouse. Oh, that was kind of weak. Come on, a little more. There, now we got, that's much better. And then everyone recognizes this, just changed its name. So it used to be clapper rail, now it's a ridgeways rail. And then there's also a very elusive little bird called a California black rail. And we have confirmed black rails out on our site. It's kind of difficult for us. We're really happy to have them, but we're also remodeling their house and we're not supposed to disturb them. So that makes some of the little challenges that we have. But they're unusual ground nesting birds and they don't tweet or chirp, they kind of growl. So it's kind of fun, a little something different to have on our site. But we also are working for critters like this, and this is the public access, not so much the Pomeranian, but the guy on the bike, someone who wants to come out and see nature. So a project like this has so many different moving parts. It's a high amount of complexity to try to make it happen. And I've been asked, now that we've come through our planning process and we have pretty much completed our design and CEQA and permitting process, and we're headed off into construction, is how do you deliver such a complex project? And this might be a slight bit of exaggeration, but really when I was meeting with Amy Hutzel at the State Coastal Conservancy, she reminded me that big restoration projects like this really require a series of daily miracles. And I thought, oh yeah, it's just hyperbole. But really when you think about it, it kind of is like a series of unfortunate events, which we've all heard of Lemony Snicket, but in our case, I think it's really a series of fortunate events. And these are really strategic decisions that we've made or some of the paths that we've chosen along the way of developing this project. And I want to go through a series of these and really kind of highlight some of those that I think have really pushed our project forward. So fortunate event number one is really selective deauthorization. There was a question early on about Corps of Engineers, trees, levees, things like that. Corps is a great partner, don't get me wrong. Much of our $1 billion of infrastructure, and that's a billion with a B, was constructed by the Corps of Engineers. The problem is sometimes they don't work as it was designed. Even before we came on the scene, Lower Walnut Creek had a tremendous amount of extra sediment that came into the channel, and it's just because of the geology of the watershed. And the Corps and the partners at the time came up with the best 1963 science of how they want to design this channel, and it almost immediately filled back in with sediment. And we have a requirement as the non-federal agency, the non-federal partner, that the Corps builds it, we maintain it. It's very difficult to maintain if you have to keep going out there and dredging it. It's not sustainable for our budget, and it's not sustainable for the environment that's out there either. And so really, we were caught between, the Corps telling us we had to maintain it and not being able to get permits to do it. So we worked with the Corps for over 10 years on a collaborative project to try to reinvent this. And it was very clear that our planning process expectations and the Corps' ability to deliver on those planning process, that was really square peg in a round hole, was not a good fit. So we worked with our local congressman, Mike Thompson, and we actually had an act of Congress that was a selective deauthorization. 22 miles of the channel, 18 miles works pretty good, 4 miles did not. That's where we drew the line, and we were able to get it removed from the Corps system in 2014. And that's when we were presenting at the symposium last time in Pleasant Hill. We had just done that, and we were embarking on our planning process. So we've done a lot since then, which we'll highlight here in a minute. But really, selective deauthorization, with the support of our Board of Supervisors, was really one of our foundational fortunate event, I guess you can say. So the second one was really cultivating partners. One of the first things we did after our selective deauthorization, well, after the party, but I mean, it was return to local control. What do? We went out and talked to our stakeholders. We had a listening tour. We formed a stakeholder advisory group, and I see some of our stakeholder advisory members here in the audience today. And what we did is we had expectations and understanding of the channels and the creek and what was right, what was wrong, and we learned a lot from that listening tour, and that was really foundational to our community-based planning process that we worked through. And two partners really kind of rose to the occasion here, and that is East Bay Regional Park District and the John Muir Land Trust. I want to acknowledge the Park District right here. And I don't know, there's, you know, when you're in high school and the cool people sit in the back of the room, and I don't know if they're really cool or they just think so. That's the back of the room, John Muir Land Trust, so thank you, partners. So one of the other things that we learned early on was we needed to diversify our benefits. It's hard when you're not the flood control district with sea level rise and public recreation and all these things tacked on. We really are, our charter is a single purpose agency, but we look for partners and look for ways to diversify those benefits. We heard that from our public meetings, we heard that from our stakeholders, and internally and strategically we thought it would be very important to try to attract funding to actually implement such a big project as this. I won't read all the different benefits, but I will point out those last ones, sea level rise, resiliency, and adaptation. That's one of the fundamental objectives of our project. So event number 4 was really setting clear goals and objectives. And we've all been in meetings or been involved in something where they say, okay, team, let's do a mission vision statement. And then everyone rolls their eyes, and you can't imagine how painful that is. We didn't quite go to mission vision, but we really did set our goals early on, and we did set our project objectives early on. And we felt it was a little rigid, but to have that strong foundation really has been helpful as we move forward. I talk with a lot of really enthusiastic groups, and they're doing restoration, and they've got a project, and what are you doing? We're restoring something. And you really need more than that. You really have to have a wider, better thought out, more specific foundation of why are you doing this? What are you specifically trying to do? Is it something that is focused on a certain kind of species? A certain type of pollution issue? Is it, I mean, what exactly are you trying to accomplish with this? And that's where this goals and objectives process has worked out really well for us. And then it's also helpful when someone comes in and says, you know, I think you really should, and that might be a great idea, but I wish I would have talked to you 4 years ago. This is kind of helps ground us in terms of those goals and objectives. So number 5 is our visual aids. And some of you may recall my ex-boss, I almost said late boss, but recently retired boss, Mr. Mike Carlson. And I really credit him with the decision of connecting with Stephen Joseph for some of this great imagery that we use. It's part of the branding for our project. And, you know, I even somehow, I don't know how it happened, but I got some Stephen Joseph imaging in the back of my business cards. It really kind of focuses on the project, and it really has an identity. If you've been to our table in the other room, you've seen we have these mini posters. We hand them out at events like this. You probably didn't notice, but we have specific ones that we retire and bring new ones out, so it's not the same 5 ones you always see. And I'm always excited when I see them out in the wild. Like I go to a regulator's office and we're in their conference room and, hey, that's my project hanging on the wall. How cool is that? And I knew that we finally had some project traction when I went to go get my truck smog checked. and it was hanging on the wall behind the cash register. And I thought, okay, that's cool. I don't know how they got it, but when it's out there in the wild, it really does spread. And when we do take tours, and I hope you all do come out on a tour sometime, we hand them out at the end of the tour, and people are just so excited to actually get something. And I like to think that not many of them end up in the recycle bin. They actually do go out and help spread the message of what we're doing. And so being able to have inspiring pictures of our project, even though this is a before picture, I think it's recognizable as, hey, this is the kind of habitat we have. And of course, it doesn't hurt when you got Mount Diablo in the background. Another thing we did is we hired a visual artist to come up with some artistic representations of what it might be. Early on, when I was doing these presentations with a lot of bullets and a lot of points I'm trying to make, this is really for the visual learners in the room. This is the picture version of all that other stuff I was saying. And so to summarize this strategic decision or fortunate event, the branding of the project really does matter. And we've been consistent with that. And I've heard that from a lot of other folks that this is really key. So in 2015, it was a little more difficult, a little more obtuse to say, hey, climate change is really important for what we're doing. I think today that conversation's a lot easier to have. You note in our objectives, it was really foundational to our project in that we want to be resilient to mid-century and adaptable to end of century. And in case you're wondering, this guy in the video, this is from our somewhat amusing Lower Walnut Creek Adventures series on YouTube. I hope you all go see it. And you'll have to watch to the end of the 2-minute thing to see if he gets wet. He gets wet. And so another benefit of having Lower Walnut Creek really be, I mean, this is kind of like, this is Waterfront Road, and we call it Under Waterfront Road because this is from a king tide, and this is really a vision of the future of what we're going to see more and more out here. Everyone thinks of the Embarcadero and pushing someone in a wheelchair with water lapping at them. That's an iconic picture. This is the Contra Costa version of the Embarcadero and sea level rise. But this has also opened us up to other funding sources for state cap and trade monies and other greenhouse gas sequestration funds, and things that we wouldn't normally have access to, and one that straight restoration projects typically would not have access to. But because it's fundamental to our project, and because we have those multiple benefits, making sure we included this, it was a great, fundamental, fortunate event. So another one is really these multiple benefits bring diverse funders. And so we were able to attract funding from California Department of Fish and Wildlife, from their Prop 1 funding, Department of Water Resources through their Integrated Regional Water Management Plan, Wildlife Conservation Board through some state cap and trade money, also United States EPA through their San Francisco Bay Water Quality Improvement Fund. I'm really excited about our NIFWIF funding, which is a National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and that is a nationwide competitive grant. We were one of 5 on the West Coast, and that includes all the way out to Micronesia and the Hawaiian Islands. And we were the largest one in California, and that one just recently came in, and I was super excited. And then also tomorrow morning, Linus and I will be in San Francisco for the board meeting of the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. And I'm hopeful that they will take staff's recommendation for a $7.9 million award for the project. I'm an optimistic person. It's not official until tomorrow, but I still included it right here. So all in, when you really look at all the different steps that we took to get here and all those diversity of benefits, this represents about $14.1 million of funding that we've attracted. And that's kind of an abstract number, but really we're talking about a $17 million project. So that is a huge number and a huge percentage, and we're really happy with how that came out. And I think if we didn't have these strategic decisions or these fortunate events, it would be much more challenging to get to this point. So we had set up this awesome twilight tour tomorrow, but unfortunately rained out. So we have a clipboard at our table in the room here, so when you're getting your beer and your snacks later, come by, ask about the project, and if you're interested in a tour, you can sign up on our interest list. We don't sell it to anybody, but we'll just email you when we have a tour that's coming up in case you're interested. So we're moving onward to implementation, and I think there's still a couple of these fortunate events that need to happen. I don't know if it's quite a series of daily miracles, but we're really on track to start construction in 2020. And we figure it's going to take us about 2 seasons to do all the heavy earthwork that we need to do. And then the John Muir Land Trust will follow with Pacheco Marsh Public Access and Recreation. So I hope that you take a look at our webpage and follow us on Facebook. And then when it's time for the ribbon cutting and other grand events, we definitely would love to have you there. So this isn't quite an artist rendition or anything like that. This is real life, and this is Walnut Creek Channel, and this is really a 1960s way of thinking. And as Mitch talked about in some of the history earlier today, this is really driven by tremendous flooding in a rapidly urbanizing Contra Costa County. And communities wanted this, they wanted it right now. And our flood control district provided that because that's how our Board of Supervisors directed us to do it. Since I've been with the flood control district, there's been a dramatic shift, and we have been really trying to steer that boat and broaden that support. So really, as we talk about the 50-year plan, and a lot of that is key to the evolution here at the symposium as we look over time and how the restoration community has evolved, we're really seeing kind of a seismic shift from the old way of thinking into a much more sustainable new way of thinking. And I'm happy to have been part of that overall. So I'll leave you with this, which is an artist rendition from, this one is not real life, but it will be. And this is looking south towards Mount Diablo across our North Reach or Pacheco Marsh. And this is from one of the wildlife overlooks that the John Muir Land Trust will be putting in when they open Pacheco Marsh. And so we're happy to be partnering with a lot of folks, a lot of funders, a lot of people in this room to make it look like this and to have happy people out here learning all about the marsh. And I did tack on our webpage down here, so if you have any questions, always can find it at lowerwalnutcreek.org or look us up on Facebook. And if you want to laugh, Lower Walnut Creek Adventures on YouTube. For that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, you have some questions. And one of them is, are you collaborating on the restoration with your neighbor Central San? And if so, how?
The answer is absolutely yes, and we kind of have to. If you look at the map of Pacheco Marsh, there's like a ridge right down the middle of it, and that is their outfall pipeline. And so not only are we coordinating as neighbors, but we're having long-term discussions for, is it possible for the treated effluent that gets discharged into Sassoon Bay to come up and nurture some of these wetlands? And that's a long-term collaborative discussion, and one that we'll hopefully see some interest in, but no firm commitment as of yet.
There was one on here and it vanished, but hopefully I don't paraphrase it. Is the project protect fish and wildlife also?
We protect not only the special status species that were in the cute pictures that are up here, we also have secondary benefits for salmonids, as well as a number of avian species that might come and want to hunt some of our special status species, like the cute little salt mouse, harvest mouse and such. So we really provide a diversity of benefits, even though our primary benefits are for the species that we have up here.
Well said. Thank you, Paul. And I'm going to bring Lisa up, and she's going to present our final award of the evening, and then we're going to have a presentation by David Wood.
All right, the award that we've all been waiting for, the Watershed Volunteer. And then we actually have 3 this time around. Actually, it was 4, but one had to leave early. So as we all know, volunteers make the world go round when it comes to our kind of work, whether you're doing a planting, whether you're removing invasive species or cleaning up trash. Volunteers keep it all going. And so there are a few stellar volunteers that I would like to acknowledge. The first one, who already had to leave, was Mike Ancio, and he has worked with Friends of San Ramon Creek and the Walnut Creek Watershed Council to map Arundo Donax throughout the entire watershed. I think we found over 266 stands, which he used satellite imagery and then ground truth. And then he came up with this entire method to go through and identify it so we can develop a plan to eradicate it eventually. The next volunteer that I'd like to acknowledge is Martha Berthelsen, who is So Martha has worked and volunteered with the Watershed Project for a very long time. And the nomination form that was sent for you was absolutely amazing. Here, I'll switch sides with you. And if you would like to say something, you are more than welcome to do so. You don't have to, there's no pressure.
I'd just like to say that I moved to El Sobrante about 30 years ago, and I used to walk past San Pablo Creek at the library and look at it and think, somebody ought to do something, but I don't know anybody who takes care of creeks. Well, I found a group, thanks to the Watershed Project, and all of you, so thank you. And I feel like I'm just one of many, many volunteers that make this all work.
Thank you so much for what you do. All right, our next volunteer that we would like to acknowledge is Doug Burgess. So I'm not sure if he's here today or not, but he works with the Alhambra Creek Watershed Council, and he developed a map for all of the interpretive signs in that, in that watershed, which is quite a lot of work because depending on all the different groups that are working there, there's a number of signs. So congratulations and thank you, Doug. And then last but certainly not least is Heather Rosemarin and the Friends of Pleasant Hill Creek's Executive Committee, which it's a group of 4 volunteers, I think it's 4, that have done, reinvigorated this watershed group. So over here, watch your step.
Oh, that's a bright light.
And if you want to say something, you are more than welcome to do so.
Okay, that sounds great. Here, hold the word. Let's get a picture. Somebody, thank you so much. All right, where's Wendy? All right. Thanks. Thank you so much. I'll say a few words. All right. Thank you so much. So we are the steering committee. The 4 of us founded Friends of Pleasant Hill Creeks. In 2017, there had been a prior group that had kind of become inactive for about 5 years. And I remember when I was a little girl going down to the creeks in Pleasant Hill and looking at the tadpoles and the frogs, and that was one of my favorite things to do. So when I moved back to Pleasant Hill as an adult, I wanted to connect with a creeks group, but the group wasn't active anymore. So I called the RCD and just left a voice message saying, hi, I'm looking for a creeks group, would be willing to start a creeks group, need help, don't know who to talk to, have no idea how to do this. Like, if someone could call me back, that would be great. And Elisa Robinson called me back 15 minutes later and got me going in the right direction. So we're super, super happy with the way the group has developed. Since 2017, more than 100 volunteers in the community have come out to do cleanups. We've picked up more than 5,000 pieces of trash. We've it kicked off a bird survey with Mount Diablo Audubon Society, which has gone out monthly for 2 years to identify birds, and we have 90 species of birds in our creek system so far, and water quality monitoring, working with Helen and the Watershed Project. And so I just want to say the big message here is that it really takes a team, and I want to thank some of the people who've been so generous with their time. I'm probably not going to get everybody in this list, but Leslie Hunt, you were so generous with your time. Thank you. Thank you. Bob Simmons at the Walnut Creek Watershed Council, all the folks who participate in the Walnut Creek Watershed Council, because we've learned from all the other creeks groups, and that's the whole goal of the council, and all of the agencies who've been generous with their time and responsive, the Flood Control District, the RCD, and Fish and Wildlife, and the folks in the city of the Civic Action Commission who sponsored our cleanups. So I'll stop talking now. That's my cue. But you know, we love being part of this community, and we want to keep it up and keep cleaning up our creeks and restoring our creeks. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. All right, thank you for hanging in there. We saved the best for last. No pressure at all, David. David Wood, through a collaboration with River of Words, there is art in our poster section. If you're not familiar, River of Words is an international competition where students, both elementary and high school, enter artwork, poetry, and their artwork is inspired by nature. David Wood is an English instructor at Northgate and a board member for River of Words, and he's going to share his insights about writing about nature. David Wood.
How do I use this thing?
If you want to go forward, you get this guy.
Want to go
backward,
back
you
out,
get that guy.
And if I want to take this off of here, I just do that, right?
Yep.
Hi, everybody. I feel like a little bit of an imposter up here for a number of reasons. One, I am an environmentalist, but that's not why I'm here. My love is words and teaching English, and I've been doing it for a long time. And I think after 35 years at one place, I think I'm beginning to do it pretty well. And then you have a morning like I had this morning, and you doubt everything. But I got involved in River of Words about 20 years ago. And the other reason, and so the people who should really be up here, one is the kids who did that stuff out there. So please go look at that poetry and go look at that art, because it is, I should click this and go to my presentation, shouldn't I? Oh, okay. Look at it and appreciate it. They are the real voices that we should be hearing. Second one, of course, is Robert Hass, poet laureate from the United States from 1995 to 97, who started River of Words when he was poet laureate to get kids to inspect their environments and to find their artistic and creative writing voices through observation and writing and art, and by extension, creating environmental activism. And it's quite a phenomenal notion. And so he started the contest. And with that, these things have been published for years, and Maureen in the back has a number of those. So anybody who is interested, please take a look. They are really worth your time. They will give you not only joy, but admiration for what our children can do. The third person who should be here, rather than me, is my wife. Because, as usual, all the good things that have happened that I have done and gotten involved with over the last 25 years have been because Kathy said, you should do this, or we should do this, or you should come see this. And so I do, and I get excited and get involved. That's what happened with River of Words in the late 90s. My wife's art studio is down in the Sawtooth building in Berkeley, where River of Words was located, and she said, you have to come see this. So I did. And I was knocked out. I mean, artwork by that, look at that, 11 years old. I couldn't, and then with the poetry that is just almost, so fresh that you can't believe it. So I talked to the director at that point, Pamela Michaels, and got involved, and she asked me to be on the board, and I've been working with River of Words ever since. Before it came to St. Mary's in 2008, when, as you all know, since you are in the nonprofit world, everything dried up, right? All funding dried up, and it was thanks to St. Mary's that this could continue, because they took us under their wing and have now restored River of Words to what it was then. And again, 9 years old. Look at that. So, why is this important now? I'm here as a teacher of writing, and there's certain things that I know about it, and there's certain things I see every day. There's certain things you guys know, probably. I'm sure a number of you have had children, juniors and seniors in high school, who have spent hours and hours and hours angsting over their college essays, right? I supposedly am supposed to help them do that and to write those. And I have found over the years that it is the worst piece of writing that they do. And there are a number of reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that they think they have to say something important and they don't go observe their worlds and use their voices. And one of the things that has happened in writing instruction over the last 30 years as I've been involved in it is we have done some things very, very well. And what we have done very well, I think, is on the left. I have students all the time, if I give them a short piece of literature, they can write about it, they can do their 5-paragraph essay, they can write their thesis statement, they can conclude, and they can use MLA format, and they can paraphrase and summarize, and sometimes even analyze, if you give them the formula to do it. And that's important, but that is not what real writing is, if we really look at it. It is trying to find something to say, to give the students a voice, to have them observe their world, find out what is important about it, and write about it from their point of view. And that is hard work for them and for teachers. And I think River of Words helps them do that. And we have turned away from this in education. Creative writing classes are not valued as they were 30 years ago. And student voice is not valued as it was 30 years ago. We have returned to an academic voice that makes them all sound like educators. Thank God. So, this is what they know how to do. What they don't know how to do as well is find what they have to say that is important to them. And I think that one of the things that we do with River of Words is not only give them the environment to write about and to observe, but we give them the tools and the voices to do it. Okay? I was going to, when I first imagined this talk, when I thought it was going to be 15 or 20 English teachers, was going to do a group participation thing and have you observe something. It's a little hard to do that with a group of 200. So what I thought was, I would show you some pictures. I was lucky enough to go to Yosemite about 2 weeks ago. And if any of you have not been recently, it is still as magical as it ever was, particularly when it's not the summer. And I took 3 pictures of Half Dome. And you wouldn't recognize that it is the same thing every time you do it. Or what I mean by that is you don't necessarily know this is the same place every time you see it, because it changes so much. And you have to observe it, and you have to watch it, and you have to imagine it, and you have to put it into your head. And these pictures help, but particularly the one in the middle, when I walked up there and saw that I could not see it and had to imagine it, that vision is in my mind and will be for a very long time. Now, what we try to do with River of Words is to get children to do that, to observe their worlds, to put them into their heads. And one of the ways you do that is by giving them things to do and observe. So I have a couple of lesson plans here. I'm going to go through them just real quick, of things that we can ask kids to do to get them to see what is out there beyond themselves, get them into their environments and their world. Here is a poem by Robert Francis. And if you would bear with me for a minute, sometimes reading poetry can be tedious. I hope it's not. Keep me from going to sleep too soon, or if I go to sleep too soon, come wake me up. Come any hour of night. Come whistling up the road, stomp on the porch, bang on the door. Get me out of bed and come and let you in and light a light and tell the northern lights are on and make me look. Or tell me clouds are doing something to the moon they never did before and show me. See that I see. Talk to me till I'm half as wide awake as you and start to dress, wondering why I ever went to bed at all. Tell me the walking is superb. Not only tell me, but persuade me. You know I am not too hard persuaded. And to open it, this opens them up to, hopefully, this is a command to be involved and to see. And from that, we can ask the kids then to recall a time that someone took them and showed them something. And showed them something in detail and see what that is, and then take and have them recall that and remember it. And the rest of the details are not necessary, and as students write, invite them to try to use some of these structures. And when you do that, you get students to do things like this. The mother of man, sing me the song of man and water. Take me to the mother of man and show me her heart of river that flows through her bones of stone, for the oak of courage that gifted her strength and the arrows of words that gifted her pain would be not without her heart of river and her bones of stone. Wow. Isn't that beautiful? Or from a 10-year-old, sitting in the car, I hear a sound of a bird. I gaze out of the window. It's a stellar jay. Black head, dark as a storm cloud. Blue body, dark as sky at sunset with the sun sinking beneath the hills. I feel suddenly that I want to be a stellar jay, joyfully gliding and making magnificent long swoops. So I imagine that I have feathers blue as cloudless sky, a beak of pure charcoal, and feet that can grasp tree branches. I can feel myself soaring. I can feel myself free. I don't think that needs much commentary. I'll get back to that one now. And I'll get back to that one too. So we're going to go to here. This is a thing about watersheds. Robert Hass's poem, Spring Rain, is one of the best poems I've ever read about a watershed. And this is also used as a kickoff to what kids can do when you get them to observe their places. Spring Rain by Robert Hass. Now the rain is falling freshly in the intervals between sunlight. A Pacific squall started no one knows where, drawn east as the drifts of warm air make a channel. It moves its own way like water or the mind and spills this rain passing over. It spills this rain passing over. The Sierras will catch it as last snow flurries before summer, observed only by the wakened marmots of 10,000 feet, and we will come along across it again as larkspur and pestamon sprouting along the creek above Sonora Pass next August, where the snow melt will have trickled into Dead Man's Creek, and the creek spilled into the Stanislaus, and the Stanislaus into the San Jose, or San Joaquin, and the San Joaquin into the slow marshes of the bay. That's not the end of it. The gray jays of the mountains eat larkspur seeds, which cannot propagate otherwise. To simulate the process, you have to soak gathered seeds all night in the acids of coffee and then score them gently with a very sharp knife before you plant them in the garden. You might use what was left of the coffee we drank in Lisa's kitchen visiting. There were orange poppies on the table in a clear glass vase, stained near the bottom to the color of sunrise. The unstated theme was the blessedness of gathering and the blessing of dispersal. It made you glad for beauty like that, casual and intense, lasting as long as the poppies last. That word's beautiful about what water brings. This is fun. And so then choose a place. Stream, lake, river, ocean, pool that means something to you. Think about the experience you've had there. Write a little about where and when it was and the details you remember and put them in it. Now, I'm going to go back to this. Yes. And this is the poem that comes out of this, that one the 15-year-old wrote. I won't read the whole thing, but I think they're, well, maybe I will read the whole thing. Creek Water Girl. I am made of dirty Alabama creek water and the sticky, sweet clover honey that I taste during the summer. The honey smells like dead flowers until it touches your tongue, and it is the forbidden sweet goodness that your parents put on the top shelf of the pantry when you are a child so that you do not eat it. I am made of sun-skinned bronze from running in the neighbor's sprinklers because it grows so hot in July that my skin melts off the bone like the ribs everyone here likes to eat, and I would prefer to cool off in needle-sharp water than to become the next piece of meat at the Turner's cookout. I am made of chasing ice cream trucks miles through the neighborhood for the taste of a chemically tasting coconut fruit bar that reminds me of sunscreen, but I will eat anyway because my parents gave me $1 and the rest of the kids have $1.50 at least, but money is tight and I do not complain. I am made of the ghosts that reside in the choir room of the Presbyterian church I used to attend, the ones that whisper names in the dark room and shriek when the keys of the piano are played, no matter how tenderly. I am made of little pony plastic castles that smell like artificial bubblegum flavoring and the cheap plastic of dolls, the kind you touch once and the smell will not rub off no matter how hard you scrub yourself in the shower. I am made of muddy footprints that children track in the bathroom after a long day of doing nothing but causing trouble. The ones that smell of dirt and sugar cookies from the neighbor's house. The tracks that become embedded in the bathroom mat after so long. These tracks become the closest things to veins. I am made of caffeine-free cans of Diet Coke that my grandmother drinks religiously. I am cold like them, and much like them, I have a bitter aftertaste. The only difference is that my grandmother loves her caffeine-free Diet Coke, and she despises me for how much I remind her of my mother. I am made of wasp strings that hurt when you touch them, the kind that brothers laugh over when you are rubbing your puffy eyes with dirt-stained hands because the sting of your knee hurts. It's the kind of sting where the stinger stays in and your body burns as a father removes it with tweezers and your sister holds your shoulders down. And finally, I am made of dirty Alabama creek water and the dead black-eyed Susans that grow rampant in my backyard. The flowers wilt and die, but in the end they always grow back next spring. I would like to think I grow the same way. Folks, I just want to encourage you to encourage your children to write, to find their voices, to see what is out there, and make, and know that when they do stuff like this, this never goes away. They are changed. And they are made into the kind of people that we want to be. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Sure. I am going to pull up my little app here, see if anyone has any questions. And they do not. But is this a yearly competition? Can you tell me about that?
Competition. Maureen, you're probably the one to speak to this more so than I am. But or you could do it from back there.
River Words is an annual international art and poetry competition. It is, we like it best when we work with teachers and are able to provide them with educational materials for them to use in their classrooms. We also have a number of professional workshops as well. So we bring teachers in. A lot of teachers say, I don't know how to write poetry. I don't know how to teach art. Well, you can do it and we can help. So we really like to work in the classroom with teachers because they're the ones doing the hard work. It really stimulates their learning and their imagination, and it really gets kids outside and really excited about their environment. So if you do have any questions about that, or if you're interested, please come talk to me. I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
And the contest has grown over the last 3 or 4 years to now it's up 60% in California last year, and we hope it will be up another 60% this year. And over 4,000 entries in poetry and art. So we're on our way back after a few bad years, but I think when you see the books and you see what these children produce, you will be amazed. Okay.
Thank you very much, David Wood. Okay, the plan is we're going to watch a 3-minute and 21-second video, and then Elisa's going to come up and give us the closing and tell us what we can expect for refreshments. Thank you very much for hanging in there. This is the last you'll see of me. My name is Brendan Moran, and I really, really appreciate your time today. As somebody who was at his first symposium, I can't say how impressed I am about the quality of the volunteers and the work everybody does. So thank you.
What is going to be the issues 10 years from now? I mean, that in 20 years ago with sea level rise, climate change, there probably were people talking about it. Maybe there's a couple, but it wasn't really in our common way of thinking like it is now. So what is going to be that next? I mean, that's still the challenge we are adapting to. So what is that next challenge that's going to challenge us and inspire us and make us think in creativity and all those things to be able to pull this stuff together?
Conservation can be really challenging in today's political climate, and delivering meaningful conservation projects is, well, it was recently described to me as needing a series of daily miracles. And really, all the easy conservation and restoration projects are already done. What we're faced with now is a little more challenging.
When you're doing this kind of work, it feels like you're the Lone Ranger pushing a rock up a mountain, and finding out that other people have done what you're attempting to do and have succeeded, and they're very glad to help you learn from their experience. It's a very heartening thing. It's a very inspirational kind of a thing, in that we're always find a sense of community from that.
I subscribe to Mitch Avalon's 50-year plan, where he says, what we need to do over time is get the concrete out, get the riprap out, and put the trees back in. And then you get all those benefits from that. So the actual physical condition of the creeks in this county should be improving. That's what I would like to see. When I say physical, I mean the floodplains are back, the in-stream complexity is back, woody debris, the fish. There's no reason why we can't have very ecologically functioning creeks in the middle of cities.
Now, of course, climate change is much more serious. And there are a number of new issues that need to be addressed. I'm hoping, because we still see lots of volunteers, that we will find a way to address these.
Education, I think, is the key. Really trying to educate and inspire the next few generations to carry on our work, I think, is a major focus.
I would like to have an environmentally literate public.
where we don't have to be the ones doing all the education, and we don't have to be the ones doing all this outreach and, you know, trying to get people involved and engaged, where it's just something that is a part of the culture. So, you know, in a sort of weird, twisted way, kind of the work that nonprofits do, the work that we do at the RCD, hopefully eventually, if we continue our work, we'll actually put ourselves out of business. That, to me, is the ultimate goal.
Thank you to everybody for joining us today. Especially thank you, Brendan, for being such a wonderful MC and helping to guide us through the entire day. And of course, we want to thank the Flood Control District, who's always such a great supporter of the forum and the symposium. And I'm going to bring Tim Jensen up on stage with me to help me close us out this evening.
Thank you, Lisa. Well, everyone, thank you for staying to the end. I know it's not a completely full house anymore, but appreciate you staying till the end. And today we got to see a lot of diversity, variety. We had large-scale projects, small-scale. We had groups, individuals, public, nonprofit, volunteers, people that are just starting out, groups that have longevity. We're all learning from each other. And I saw lots of great work that you are doing, or I know there's lots of great work that you're doing that we didn't have time to talk about today. So I want to make sure that you're all encouraged and you're all recharged and motivated to keep doing what you're doing and to dream big. You're all doing great work. I saw lots of quality networking going on today. I know some of it was happening to me, and I'm sure a lot of you were talking and sharing. That needs to continue. Don't wait 4 years, because there's a lot of work to be done in the next 4 years. So go to the Watershed Forum meetings, get involved in the executive committee, keep your friends groups going, your watershed councils going. And then wasn't it a great venue, and the food, the decorations, a lot of good stuff. That didn't happen on accident. There were a lot of people involved putting this on, many planning meetings. And I want to shout out to one person that really oversaw and brought it all together, and that is Elisa. Please give it up for Elisa. We really appreciate all the work that you put into this, and so many people behind the scenes, so hopefully you can appreciate some of those people and mention some names too, but thank you very much for making this a successful symposium.
Thank you. One of the major things that you guys have noticed, I'm sure, throughout the day is your beautiful centerpieces. Again, Lisa Damerel in the back. She put these together. She coordinates Creek and Crockett, and if you want to take one of these home with you, they are living, they are viable, they will grow happily at your home or work. You can give a $5 donation to Creek. We also have Chris Lim and our entire planning committee, actually, that helped make this a success. We met once a month for an entire year, and this is what happened. The Department of Conservation and Development, Abby and your crew, you kept the check-in going, and you kept me sane. Thank you. Appreciate that. And again, the rest of the RCD staff who helped make this thing happen. And all of our presenters, who I think did an amazing job. Thank you so much. And if you do want to be involved in the Contra Costa Watershed Forum, you can always come to our meeting. Our next one is on January 8th. It's going to be at Big Break Regional Park or Shoreline out in Oakley. We're going to look at some East County issues. We're going to look at the Delta Atlas, that I think we had a poster in there from East Bay Parks earlier. And then hopefully we'll get some other interesting stuff happening. So our final volunteers, I forgot to say thank you to our flood control volunteers who helped set up and will help break down. And we're just going to wrap it up. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate your support.